Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I haven't been in a comic book shop, and I couldn't tell you the last time because um, I can't remember the last time I bought a comic book that wasn't crowdfunded. I mean, uh, that industry, and kind of the bad thing about it was that once comics stopped being on the spinner rack, the comic book shop did become that hub for our culture, the nerd culture. I mean, I remember in the 80s, you could go to Walden Books and they had a nice selection of, D&D books, and the fantasy section took up the back wall. So, I mean, you could meet people there, but uh, last time I was in,
My first D&D books were at an On Q, which is, a big chain record store. And they had like the one rack that was all their nerd stuff basically.
I don't know, I mean, the last time I went into the local Barnes and Noble, the science fiction fantasy now shares one rack. One side is science fiction, one side is fantasy, and that's it. I'm like, what happened? Last month, but I mean, it's all being taken over by manga now because that's what everybody wants to read. And hey, if they're telling great stories, great. I think maybe that's just a challenge we need to rise.
Well, and that's why the whole Iron Age media thing, that guy, when I first heard it, like that's why it resonated so much to me. Is one thing that I'm a marketer, and that's my thing. And the one thing that I've seen that I look at as being an overarching trend is nobody trusts anybody in power. And like like big companies continue to do things that make people not trust big companies. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. And the thing that I find very interesting is that as this happens, you have this industry, or we'll just call it like nerd culture, is kind of finally done the thing that they needed to do, which was take the crap into their own hands and start making their own stuff. And the one thing that they have in that is that it's much easier to trust a person. It's much easier to connect with a person than a big company, because that's all, like all those brands and imprints from our childhood are. They're big companies. Stephen King is a big company. Like, yeah, he writes books, but they've been making jokes about him in Family Guy for 15, 20 years about, is he really writing books? What are these things you're pumping out here, So, you have that, you have, people, you know, signing up to make a TV show off their most successful book series, then not finishing the book series and taking advantage of the trust of people. And so the more as creatives that we can kind of give people an alternative that they can trust, I think the better off everyone's going to be. And I think that as consumers, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people that can, you know, accept our fandom and give us somebody that we can trust is going to be at least live honestly with that. Not try and undermine our expectations at every, turn. The bottom line is we like the kind of stuff we like the kind of stuff of. I don't need to have, oh, this is just genius rewriting of the entire concept of what a pulp story is. It's like, no, I like pulp stories because I like pulp stories. Just give me more of that.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to authenticity. People are going to respond and say, "This person's a fan of this." They're not a tourist who's just showed up to take advantage of the hype that surrounds it. I'm one of those 50-year-old white kids that saved my lunch money and mowed yards to make Star Wars, Marvel comics, and Dungeons and Dragons what they are today. But now those properties act like they don't want me. So I guess that's the reason a lot of us are saying, "All right, we'll make our own. We'll do it ourselves."
Well, to me, the thing is I guess I don't know from I guess because I understand what ESG is, I understand why the things that are happening with the industry is happening in the industry. But at the same time, like, who buys and spends billions of dollars to buy a fandom and then decides, well, we don't like who that fandom is, so let's recreate it? Because it's just a bad business decision. Unless your actual goal was to undermine modern mythology, in which case you did a really good job of that. You know, these stories that have been teaching people for generations are now no longer able to do that because nobody cares about them anymore. Congratulations. I guess we all just become Japanese.
Well, that could have been maybe the 14th story in my new book if I had thought about it. The reason that things are happening the way they are.